Hey everyone, today I'm going to be taking a closer look at the book The Secret History of Twin Peaks by Mark Frost. Just a warning from the outset of the video, this is going to be a spoiler video. I'm going to be talking about details in the book, and I'm also going to be talking about season 3. So if you don't want to be spoiled in any way, shape or form, please turn me off now. Otherwise, I will start. The first thing I want to talk about in regards to the book was potential season 3 characters. And I'm going to start with TP, who is our investigator of the dossier. TP is revealed to be Tamara Preston later in the book. I think it's likely that we're being prepped for her to be a central character in season 3. Mark Frost has been very careful in creating authentic voices for each character in this novel. The voice of the archivist is very identifiable from the outset. I think the characters that we know and love already in Twin Peaks, I think, are written very well, and Mark Frost has represented them really well. So I don't think there's any reason to believe that he wouldn't have taken the same care in writing the voice and the character of Tamara. So what I noticed about Tamara was that at the beginning, when she first is investigating the dossier, she's very formal and precise, but towards the end of her investigation, her tone is much more casual. For instance, on page 300, she expresses, "Jesus, we knew Tricky Dick was cracking toward the end, but this is Humpty Dumpty territory." A far cry from the way she interpreted the dossier at the beginning, when she would just analyze it straightforward and not give us much personal opinion. She also expresses on page 313 that she could use a drink, and I think that she sounds as if perhaps she's been worn down a little by investigating the dossier. It's impossible not to notice that Tamara is a skeptic, almost in the same vein as a character like Dana Scully from the X-Files. However, I think she does express interest in some of the subjects that are tackled in the book and the dossier, and she is constantly implying that there is always more investigative work to be done. There has been speculation on who could possibly play Tamara in season 3. I'm going to predict that the actress who plays Tamara will be an older actress, because I get the sense from some of the comments that Tamara makes make her sound a little older and a little wiser than someone who is just starting out in their career. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but there are lots of like film references which she seems to have experienced personally, and I know that you can just go back and watch films from past eras, but she does speak about them as if she's personally experienced them within her lifetime, and naturally as they are released. And she also uses old-fashioned phrasing from time to time. I would say from reading to trying to identify Tamara's age, that I would put her somewhere around the age of 40. So there are multiple actresses who have been named in the Twin Peaks season 3 cast who could play Tamara, including people like Ashley Judd, Naomi Watts, Laura Dern. There's so many that I've actually forgotten who else is in the cast. But I think Krista Bell, the singer, was even suspected among some fans because of her appearance in the recent trailer, in which it seems like they were highlighting some of the main cast of season 3. So that is a possibility, but I definitely think that it's likely that we will be seeing Tamara as a character. Tamara's relationship with Gordon Cole is something that is quite interesting, and she makes a couple of comments to having been out for coffee with Gordon. I'm going to assume that this was a purely professional outing and that there was no romantic feelings between Gordon Cole and Tamara. I've got the sense that Gordon Cole was giving Tamara the dossier in the same way in which he inaugurated Sam Stanley into that special group of agents by showing him Lil. I definitely get the feeling that Tamara's name could actually be added to the list of agents, which is found on page 322, and which she does not realise the significance of when she is investigating it. Another potential season 3 character who appears in this book, or he doesn't really appear, but he is mentioned, and he's mentioned so often that I don't think there is any reason for him to be mentioned or in fact created unless he is going to appear in season 3, and that is Franklin Truman, or Frank Truman as he's referred to by those who know him well. So it has been confirmed that Michael Ontkean will not be reprising his role as Sheriff Truman, and yet there have been leaks from the set in which Robert Forster is shown wearing a sheriff's badge and uniform. It seems likely that Robert Forster will in fact be playing Frank Truman. I really like how Frank has been integrated into that fraternity of the Bookhouse Boys and how he seems to be at the heart of everything. I think we do get a strong sense of what Frank is like as a person, and we are given some hints as to his inner thoughts and feelings. This picture of the Bookhouse library on page 236 shows Frank Truman's favourite book, and that is called Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, and I just thought that was interesting because this is the book which kind of leans and it's placed rather centrally. Now I might be reading more into that than is intended, but I think the fact that Frank's favourite novel is at the centre might imply that Frank himself is the heart of this group of people. It does feel slightly that Frank is not just Harry's brother, but he's brother to everybody, and that he has a strong idea of the family and what that means. And just a word in regards to the Bookhouse Boys story, I think that this is a great way to educate Twin Peaks fans on the history of the Bookhouse Boys, and it helps explain a lot, like why Andy was ever employed. Given his apparent inadequacy and lack of education, clearly the Twin Peaks fraternity, it makes sense as it's described in the book here. I also think that we see another side to Andy, as well as other characters from the Twin Peaks universe in the book. So Dr. Jacoby, for instance, doesn't come across as the quack that he does in the series. What he actually says in his reports and everything in this book make complete sense, even if they are a little bit wacky. But back to Frank Truman, I do think that this is a nice way to introduce that character. Angle of Repose is not a book I'm familiar with, I haven't read it, but it's clearly something that an educated and deep thinking man would read. So I think that gives us a little insight into Frank's personality. Okay, one more potential season 3 character, and this is very brief, but on page I'm just looking at my notes. What a geek. Looking at your notes. On page 234, Hank Jennings is killed by a, quote, distant cousin of the Renault family, end quote. And this could explain the presence of the actor who played Jacques Renault in the cast list for season 3. He could be playing a relative of Jacques. He could in fact be playing the exact person who killed Hank. Okay, so I'm going to talk about other things now, and I really wanted to mention Audrey Horne, because that section about Audrey in the bank, first of all, when I read it I was a little confused because it turns on its head the reason why Audrey was in the bank, giving us a different perspective and asking us to believe that she was there for a different reason as is shown in the series. I guess that is plausible, but that aside, did anybody else get a weird sense when reading this in regards to how they describe Audrey? On page 228 she's described as a genuinely tragic victim, and then we learn that Ben is visiting Audrey and sitting by her side in the hospital bed, and although he experienced no overnight conversion, as is mentioned on page 231, he is a changed man eventually. The fact that Ben kept things secret about what Audrey was doing at the bank implies that something terrible has actually happened to me in the long run to Audrey, and that actually she has possibly sustained a life-changing injury. And on page 233, the line is written, "Would the injury to Ben's daughter serve as a further wake-up call to make him, Ben, more the man his daughter longed for him to be?" And I just think the way that the term "the injury" is written there implies that it's, you know, it is kind of significant injury. And I don't know about anybody else, but I was kind of getting visions of boxing Helena going through my head when I was reading this. Has she lost limbs? Has she been paralyzed? You know, has she been terribly scarred? I just do get the feeling that something awful has happened to Audrey. Major Briggs says Audrey's luck was as bad that day as her intentions were good. Now, I think to talk about any kind of incident in that way implies that it wasn't just an easy recovery, or that in fact the injury was not that severe. I'm half expecting, when Audrey appears in season 3, to see her maimed in some way. I know that sounds morbid, but that's the sense I got from reading this. Another thing I wanted to address today is the Annie situation, and in regards to Norma's story as it's reported in the book. In the section where the details about Norma's life are altered slightly from what we know about Norma in the series, the section is written by Cooper, as far as I can understand. It seems to have been written after the stuff with Josie happened, but before Cooper met Annie. That's the way I understand it to be. I could be wrong about that, but that's how I have interpreted the facts as they are presented. From this, I gather that there are particular reasons why Norma's details might have changed. One is that Cooper is simply writing a mix of fact and fiction in the same way that Mark Frost has ended real-life conspiracy stories into the story of Twin Peaks. 2, Cooper might have his facts completely wrong. 3, Cooper wants to hide something, or the dossier has been altered in some way. I think all of these are plausible explanations, and that until season 3 starts we probably won't know whether this is important or not. Another thing I wanted to address is Gordon Cole's initial document, which appears at the beginning of the book, in which he talks about a crime scene which was investigated where the dossier was found. The crime scene is classified as top secret, and he needs to know the archivist's identity. He tells Tamara that this crime is unsolved and classified, and that it may have relevance to crime or crimes which took place in 1991, which are similarly classified. So my questions in regard to this are, what would link it to the 1991 crimes? And the only things I could think of was A, the presence of the dossier alone, or is it something else? Like was there further murders by Bob in 1991? Was there letters under fingernails, or was there the presence of the ring? Or were there witnesses who may have seen either Bob or Agent Cooper, or Agent Cooper's doppelganger, whichever you prefer, or other people from Twin Peaks at the crime scene? Some interesting facts about the dossier and the ledger include the fact that at some point the ledger appears to have been exposed to the elements. So it appears that the ledger has been carted around in America, that someone has been in charge of this ledger, possibly Cooper, and that the fact that it is left at the scene is possibly accidental. Another thing that stood out for me in Gordon Cole's initial document was the phrase, "Time is of the essence." Now I guess this could just refer to the fact that season 3 is on its way, and this book is like the bridge between the announcement of season 3 and the airing of season 3. Or it could, you know, actually be important in the fact that it seems to be a reference to time. And because that jumped out at me, it's something that I picked up on throughout the book, that there are several similar references, including the last thing that Tamara says when she discusses Gordon Cole again, and she quotes that Gordon Cole told her that a big part of this job, and for that matter life itself, is waiting for the right moment. So there's a lot of references to being in the here and now, and that includes references by Carl Rod, who says all there is now. Carl Rod also said what is, what was. And it also includes references by the log lady, who says this is now and now will never be again. Page 67, Chief Joseph says, we are all of the Great Spirit and we must listen when the Great Spirit speaks. Will it one day be too late to change our path to the future? And I do think it's interesting that comments of this nature seem to be relevant. What that means is anybody's guess right now, but we know that there have been references to time and moving through time in like Fire Walk with Me with Agent Jeffries, and of course time works differently inside the lodges as it does outside the lodges, as is shown when Agent Cooper goes into the lodge, the Black Lodge, and for him it's just been a relatively short period of time, but for Harry, who's waiting for him, it seems to take many hours. I guess that these references to time are as much to do with being in the moment and doing the right thing in the moment than anything else, but it is quite interesting. Okay, so one thing I wanted to say was this is something that Jacoby says. I think it's on page 209, that's what my notes say. And Jacoby says that all the spiritual insights and experiences are by necessity entirely subjective. And I was wondering if that is what Frost is trying to make the reader understand, that there is no one answer to the mystery. Is Twin Peaks a puzzle to be solved, or is it a mystery to be lived? A mystery that will never be solved? Because I know a lot of people have read this book, and I've had comments on my social media channels which imply that some people aren't as happy with some of the content of the book, in particular the alien side of it, you know, the alien stuff. I don't think Mark Frost is offering any definite explanation of the identity of the lodge spirits. I think that there are some parts of the book which are exceptionally well written, and that includes, for me, Dr. Jacoby's evaluation of the Laura Palmer case, and that also includes Log Lady's words at the memorial service of Robert Jacoby. I also think at the end of the book there is a statement by Douglas Milford which is extremely compelling and well written, and I also think that what Douglas Milford says is in fact a good way to sum up the entirety of this book, in that he says the final truths you must never forget we are utterly incapable of knowing their true intent. So some words on Major Briggs and his final statement in the dossier. It is of course quite disturbing what happens, because we are left with Major Briggs's personal thoughts, and the last thing he says is like an alarm call. Clearly he seems to realize that something has happened to Cooper, that he must take action. I think it's likely, given the fact that the actor who played Major Briggs is no longer with us, that in fact Major Briggs's character was involved in the crimes that are mentioned, which took place in 1991. I think the meeting that took place between Cooper and Major Briggs allowed both parties to come to realize what the other side was doing, and that's why there was this separation before possibly they came back together again, at which point Major Briggs is possibly killed. I think that would be a reasonable explanation as to what's going on with the crimes and why Major Briggs is never heard of again. As is revealed on page 322, Agent Tamara Preston is aware that something has happened to Cooper, and that something is bad, because she says that it's a list of agents who have suffered terrible fates, with Gordon Cole and Albert Rosenfield the only exceptions to that. So I think that gives us a good idea of where we'll be starting with the Cooper situation in season 3. What I find amusing about this book actually is there is a lot of material which links back to season 2 of Twin Peaks, the part of the season which a lot of people don't like as much, and also to characters who aren't as well embraced by the Twin Peaks fan community. And I think that this book really widens the stories to the extent that the characters are definitely worth thinking about again. Once you know that backstory behind them, I think that going back and rewatching episodes is going to be a completely different experience now. I think that actually that's a good thing because of the fact that so little was known about some of the characters in season 2 that they just don't resonate. And their actions and place in the Twin Peaks story seems to serve no they just seem to serve no purpose. But this book, which gives a lot of characters like Lana and the Milfords more depth and meaning, well, now I think that watching Twin Peaks season 2 is going to be more rewarding. So just one final thing I think I'm going to mention on page 260, the references to the Moonchild, who is an unborn child who may or may not be the Antichrist. Sorry, it's just like, it might be the Antichrist or they might not be the Antichrist. That kind of, you know, made me think, who is the Moonchild, and is that something they might be exploring in season 3? I just don't know, but that would be an interesting angle. That's all I'm going to say about the book. There is a lot in this book to get through and a lot of things I haven't mentioned today. That's it. Thank you for watching today. You can subscribe to my channel if you are interested in Twin Peaks, and you can also follow me on Twitter at TheLogSadie, and I have a Facebook page as well. Apologies if I don't get back to you straight away if you leave me a message or something, because my email accounts will not currently pick up alerts from anybody messaging me, and I'm not always on social media, so I usually get back to people eventually. But if I don't immediately, it's not because I'm being a bitch. So bye.